for the last year, I've basically been crippled by lower back issues. I mean, I've had trouble. There are days when I've had trouble getting up and walking. I mean, it's been that bad.
Yeah.
And
I mean, to be honest, Tim, you first told me about this like 8 years ago or something. Remember when you got those injections or something? You were like, I think I have degenerative
disc disease.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've had lower back issues for a long time. This is also a congenital issue. So I have what's called a transitional segment. In other words, there's a segment in my lumbar. There are vertebrae in my lumbar area that really mimic a sacral vertebral segment. And that's problematic for a host of reasons. It creates an abnormal angle. And if you can imagine just bending the paper clip over and over again in ways that it shouldn't be bent, that's sort of the feeling in the low back. And my brother has this. There are other people in my family who have this issue. So standing, extended, slow walking, like a museum walk, cocktail party type of experience can be very painful. Like the low back locks up. But in the last year, specifically, had all sorts of issues and all sorts of MRIs and specialists and PT and adjustments and traction and this, that, and the other thing. And it was a disaster, and it caused let me give myself a little more agency. I created a lot of anxiety around this because I was like, fuck, is this the new normal?
Right.
Is this really the new normal? Well,
because you project forward, like what is 5 years from now look
like? I'm like, I'm not that old,
right?
And I'm pretty active.
Your skincare is amazing.
My skincare is amazing.
I saw your Instagram video.
You know what's funny? Sidebar is how much time you can spend on like a blog post takes 6 months to put together.
Yeah.
And it's like you get like crickets and a fart in the wind, and then nobody ever reads it again. And then someone on your team is like, you know what? People ask about your skincare. Let's grab a couple clips and throw it up, and it goes bananas.
I'm on Instagram, and the first thing that pops up to me is like, "Hi, I'm Tim Ferriss. People ask me about my skincare regimen. Let me tell you, I use Bronner's natural soap or whatever." I was like, what the fuck is Tim come into?
Yeah. So here we are, folks.
Your skin looks amazing, though.
Thank you.
Breathtaking.
Coming back to the main through line here, terrifying experience with the back. And I had more or less given up. I was in the stage of grief where I was trying to get past denial and accept that this might be the new normal, because no one could figure it out. And a lot of the advice I received, many of the diagnoses were conflicting. And then decided, in part because of this, to do a few things. And part of that was going to South America, which I'm not recommending. There are a lot of risks down in South America. It's generally like safety fifth. It's not safety first. So people get into a lot of trouble. But I went down and did this training, which involved consuming a bunch of plants, also involved fasting for a week. Also involved...
Wait. Water fast?
Water fast.
Jesus,
also,
7 days?
Yeah.
Wow.
Also involved during that week, really not sitting and standing very little. So it was either hammock or cot, basically. And I'm mentioning these things because they're confounders. Translating that into basic English, that means that I can't really point back to one thing and say, this is what caused what I'm going to describe. But during the first experience, which happened to be with ayahuasca, which is a huge gun. It's, I think, treated very casually by people who do not realize what they're signing up for. I do not recommend it to most people. As my ex, who's going to become relevant in a second, would tell you, I talk many, many, many more people. 9 out of 10.
Which ex?
Out of, I'm not going to mention her name, but my most recent ex.
Okay.
Out of using ayahuasca, then I talk into using ayahuasca. Like 9 times out of 10, I say, you should not proceed. Do not pass go. For a lot of reasons. But in this particular case, had a very, very, very difficult experience. And I can kind of rank order my hardest experiences over the last decade plus. And this would be the third most difficult. Maybe the second for different characteristics, which is saying a lot. And there was a point at which in that experience, all I could imagine was having my head in the lap of my ex. Like, that's all I wanted. It was the only thing I could even visualize, because I was in the impact zone. I was just getting hit by 100-foot waves from every angle, and there was no respite. It was 10 out of 10. There was no wave, meaning it didn't ebb and flow. It was just 10 out of 10 volume from peak until end of the night. Effectively, it was unusual and incredibly difficult, and that was true for everyone in the session.
Your shaman mixed the wrong.
This guy's famous for having a brew that just cripples people, and yeah. I mean, there are a lot of other full-time clinicians from indigenous traditions who will not drink his brew. I'll put it that way.
Oh, Jesus.
And coming back to the point of the story, I'm imagining, the only thing I can envision is this woman holding my head and consoling me. That's the only thing I can imagine. And then I realize that for a year, because we separated a bit over a year ago, and this was totally subconscious, right? It wasn't a decision on my part. But I realized I had not allowed myself to feel the complete obliterating heartbreak that was, in fact, the core response to that separation, right? Like, I'd not allowed myself
to feel... From her or from previous?
From that separation, right? Like, in other words, my psyche had seemingly protected me because of my history of depression, right? Which... I've come to manage better than ever before. Like, each year I'm better able to manage it, and it's less and less frequent. It's less and less intense, but nonetheless, let's face the facts. In college, I almost killed myself, right? So there was a fear, at least subconsciously, that because of this separation, because of starting over at square one, that I could spiral into a deep depression, and that could be dangerous. So my psyche protected me from that by not letting me feel the sadness, the pain, to the extent that ended up being important, which I realized in this moment. So I allowed myself to soak in it in that moment. Trip reports are so fucking boring most of the time. And I apologize to people who might be listening and thinking, oh, here we go again, because I get it. Trust me. But in this particular case, I experienced something I've never experienced. As soon as I soaked in that, and I really soaked in it, and it was awful. It was so dark and so heavy. And then I felt my back release. And literally, I've been 90+% pain-free since that fucking moment. And it blows my mind, because at that point, I couldn't explain it with the fast, because the fast and ketones are highly anti-inflammatory. And I think that they actually played a role, in the durability of things. But the fact that there was an immediate release is interesting. It is interesting. I can't explain that through fasting. I can't explain that through the just being recumbent, right? Laying down for 7 days, because that was yet to come. And I would say that I made a tactical error in the last few weeks, which is I was like, fuck, man, like, I'm all good. And so I've neglected some of the basic self-care and strengthening and PT, which I think is important, because my low back and QL and so on, which are some of the surrounding muscles, have atrophied over the last year of avoiding working with the back. Right. There was that experience. And for people who may be interested in delving into this a little bit more, there is a book. I don't agree with everything in the book, but it is interesting in the sense that it was written by a Western trained MD who ended up then opening a healing clinic in South America focused on ayahuasca and diets, which you will read about if you get into the book, called The Fellowship of the River. So I found that book quite interesting on a number of levels. But the reason I bring this all up, number one, people had recommended this book. I think it's called Healing Low Back Pain. I may be getting the title slightly wrong. It could be Fixing Low Back Pain, but it's by Dr. Sarno, John Sarno. And this book was recommended to me. I've read it before, and the general gist is it's all in your head. Now, I took great offense at parts of this book, and a lot of it is scientifically indefensible. So unfortunately, I threw the baby out with the bathwater a bit, because he says a bunch of things that are ridiculous. And he cites these success statistics for his method while simultaneously saying, if I interview someone and they say they're not open to A, B, or C, I omit them from my treatment. Right. And I'm like, okay, well, wait a fucking second. Your selection bias is out of control. Yeah. I wanted to bring this up because that book has helped a lot of people, despite its flaws. And not everyone will, at any point, want to consume ayahuasca, which I would advise against for 90+% of the population, because it can be very destabilizing for a lot of people and very risky. I would say there are a lot of things you should do beforehand, right? Like try the talk therapy, try holotropic breath work, consider, after speaking with doctors, ketamine. After that, you can consider other tools, but ayahuasca should be like
let's do a
fifth on your
let's do a
list.
random show on ayahuasca.
We could.
Is that possible?
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, ayahuasca would be like 5th or 6th on the list of progressions. It would not be first. But I would say the Sarno books are interesting. I know they've helped people like Brian Koppelman, who's been on the podcast, amazing writer who was the co-creator of Billions, among others, Rounders, etc. And it's something that I've always, in theory, agreed with. Yes, we store stress that can have a physiological effect. There are autoimmune disorders that I think are intimately linked with different types of psychological disturbances. So you can address the problem kind of from the physiological side first. Of course, the brain isn't entirely separate. There's no kind of Cartesian separation of mind and body. So yes, the brain is physiological, but you can attack it through content in a way, or you can attack it through pharmaceuticals and physiology first. I think you can go both ways. But the Sarno book, I think, is worth a lot of people reading. The second thing I'll mention, which is very, very simple and tactical, if you have lower back pain, I'm shocked it took me this long to figure it out, and say sitting on hard chairs bothers you, or lumbar support helps you. For a year, I've been going to restaurants and asking if they have a cushion. Do you have a cushion or a pillow or something I can use to fix fucked up seating situations? This is the solution right here. This is it. This is a Pilates ball. This is a pro body Pilates. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
But honestly, this thing folds up, sticks in your pocket. Yeah. And I've been traveling with it. I've had it behind my back the whole time.
Great for first dates.
Great for first dates. Ladies love Pilates balls. But I will say, for instance, like the last time I did a podcast in this seat, I did not use this, and my back was fucking killing me afterwards. But the killing me afterwards is not just an issue for today. That's an issue that causes inflammation that fucks up my sleep for 3 or 4 days. Use this ball, no problem. I can put it behind my back, or I can put it under my ass, and it folds up and fits in your pocket. So anyway, folks, there you have it, from the sublime to the ridiculous Pilates ball.